Hi everyone, what we're looking at today is data response technique. So this is for your fifth period in preparation for your internal assessments. You can see that I've written all over this in terms of those effective wider reading techniques. So in terms of the first thing that I would do, and this is what I need you guys to do in your assessments next week, go straight to the questions. So first of all, using chart 1, describe what happened to UK aviation emissions of CO2 between 1970 and 2005. I now know what I'm looking for. Why? Look, and you can see I've underlined all the command words. I know if it's explanatory, evaluative, and so on. Why might the government want to reduce CO2 emissions from aviation? Define income elasticity of demand and comment on the income elasticity of demand for air travel. C part 1, distinguish with examples a direct tax from an indirect tax. We've actually been looking at that quite recently. C part 2, airlines pass most of the air passenger duty onto passengers. Using a demand and supply diagram, explain the effects of APD on airline tickets. D, using the data. Okay, so again, you're going to clearly be using data a lot. Discuss how effective the introduction of pollution permits in aviation is likely to be in the battle against climate change. And then E, to what extent might the control of CO2 emissions in all industries make it difficult for the UK government to achieve its macroeconomic objectives, and think of the 4 key ones. Okay, so just in terms of this, let me go through my thoughts on this. Big heading, aviation carbon trading plan will sell the climate short. That basically means there are going to be negatives to the policy. Look out for them. Aviation has been one of the fastest growing contributors to UK's CO2. You can see I've written straight away negative externalities. CO2 carbon dioxide emissions over the past 30 years. Clearly this is to do with global warming. And note that I've a problem given the UK government's promise to cut greenhouse emissions by 80% by 2015. So I've just made a little note to myself, tough to meet the obligations, the UK's promise, with aviation emissions increasing so quickly. To help reduce such emissions, the European Parliament has voted to include aviation in the European Emissions Trading Scheme. That's pollution permits. Each line is given permits allowing it to emit a maximum amount of CO2. Airlines which sell less than their limit can sell unused permits to other firms. In terms of the table, I was asked to look at this, and looking roughly at the millions of tons of carbon dioxide, that's risen from around 7 to over 35, so around a 700% rise. In terms of emissions, I should have made a note here. It's 2% that come from air, but it's growing. Okay, that's the important thing. This is set to grow at a significant rate. Critics have argued that the scheme might be ineffective. Key reasons: emissions have actually grown kind of during the years when it's been in operation. Secondly, if the price of carbon increases substantially, the current proposal will hardly affect the growth in the aviation emissions. So this is important. It sounds as if there's inelastic demand. Improvements in aircraft technology and air traffic control need to happen quickly, so that will also help. In terms of pressure groups such as Friends of the Earth, saying it can be improved by issuing fewer permits to the aviation sector, which will make it more expensive. Make them pay for all their permits rather than them being given free, and remove any unfair tax advantages that they have at the moment. They pay no tax on airfares or aviation fuel. On the other side of the debate, you've got some arguing that the costs of reducing CO2 emissions could be too high. The Stern report into climate change estimated that reducing CO2 emissions would have a cost equivalent of 1% of GDP per year. So there's a trade-off here. If you cut emissions, it might lead to a fall in GDP, although the report did point out that there would be business opportunities in markets for low carbon efficient goods such as electric cars, solar panels, and so on. As part of the drive to reduce aircraft emissions, the UK government announced an increase in air passenger duty. You should be aware air passenger duty is a unit tax Okay, it's an indirect tax, so it's imposed on spending, so like excise duties and so on, and it's passed on to passengers in the form of higher prices. Okay, so airlines will try and pass this on if they can. You can see what's happening to the rates, and then underneath the table, although increases in APD and the cost of buying emissions trading permits will drive up the price of tickets, the current recession is probably likely to be the biggest factor reducing the growth in air travel over the next few years. Now, in terms of what that means, just have a think of that. That means in a recession, when there's a fall in income, it's going to reduce growth. So a fall in income will lead to a fall in demand. So we can say YED, so the income elasticity of demand is positive, and therefore this is a normal good. Okay, so what we'd have to do at this point, obviously, we've spent a little bit of time. We need to spend that time on this, and then we need to have a little look at sort of the questions. So I'm going to run through these if I can. Let me just see if I can pull this into the side. There we go. Okay, so I've got my questions here. I'm going to minimize that a little bit if I can, and then I'm going to show you the sorts of response I would have actually come up with. Okay, so in terms of question 1, this was about the charts. What's happened to emissions? Well, as I said, it's risen roughly 700% since between 1970 and 2005. Let me just pull this in, that is better. Now I'm okay. Okay, so question part 2, why might the government want to reduce CO2 emissions? I think sort of the key thing is we've kind of mentioned some of these points already. Well, this is to reduce negative externalities, to reduce global warming. We talked about meeting their obligations as well. So most of these points are already covered. Okay, you want to reduce them, to reduce global emissions, to reduce market failure, to meet the obligations of the Kyoto Protocol and EU policy, and also further mentioned on is to respond to pressure groups such as Friends of the Earth. Okay, question B. The current recession is probably likely to be the biggest factor reducing the growth of air travel over the next few years. Define income elasticity of demand. So obviously, don't guess. Get your notes out and come up with a textbook definition. Okay, so it's the responsiveness of demand to changes in income. Okay, so the elasticity, the responsiveness. Okay, and as we mentioned, because of that quote, we know that when there's a fall in income, there's a fall in demand. This is going to be income elasticity of demand is going to be positive. This is going to be a normal good. Okay, using the data, we can get all the marks. In terms of question C, part 1, distinguish with examples a direct tax from an indirect tax. You guys absolutely should be able to do things like that now. So in terms of a direct tax, this is imposed directly on a firm or individual. Okay, so income tax on an individual or national insurance, corporation tax on a firm. We can mention these are mainly progressive. Indirect taxes are on sales or spending, so excise duty, VAT, APD. Okay, so nice and easy, and those are mainly regressive. Okay, as well. In terms of C part 2, airlines pass most of the air passenger duty APD onto passengers. Okay, now I've written there on the left hand side when I'm making notes to myself, there must be inelastic demand. Okay, so you wouldn't be able to pass that on. So you draw your curve. Demand for air travel is inelastic. We know it's a unit tax, so it will be a parallel shift in the parallel leftward shift in the supply curve. As a result of this, use your 3 skills tips, use your exemplars, and as a result of this, we would be able to say that the cost of the tax is mainly borne by the consumer. Okay, the vertical distance when we did this in class, we talked about A, B, and C, that the vertical distance between the two supply curves is the size of the tax. Well, most of that is actually P1 to P2, the increase in price. So most of it is paid by the consumer. Okay. In terms of question D, using the data, discuss how effective the introduction of pollution permits in aviation is likely to be in the battle against climate change. Now, you'd have to go back and you'd have to look at all the data on this. But obviously what you're also doing is you're looking at the pros and the cons and relating it to that battle against climate change. Now, in terms of drawing a diagram, you guys know that because of pollution permits, there's perfectly inelastic supply. There's only a certain amount given every year, okay, and that will shift to the left year on year. In terms of demand, because demand is expected to rise as economies grow and output grows, so demand grows, okay. As a result of this, look at the change in price in 2010, where demand and supply intersect, compared to 2012. Okay, now in terms of explaining how effective this is, key points: pollution can be capped in line with targets. It can internalize the externality. It encourages all firms, clean or efficient or otherwise, to invest in new technology. It stimulates firms to increase efficiency of engines and planes. Key negatives: some firms can bank these and use them in later years. Well, do we want them to do that? I would probably prefer that they're being efficient now. If too many permits are issued, it doesn't work. During recessions, such as following the credit crunch, some were given away. It can lead to prices fluctuating wildly, which is off-putting for business. Business wants certainty. If certain firms or countries allow this, pollution can be very localized. Aviation, if you look at the question, the battle against climate change, it only contributes a small amount to pollution, but an important part, obviously. It could be open to corruption or fraud because the permit system is IT based. And then if all countries or industries aren't competing in this, then obviously it's going to limit any pollution. And you can use the charts to explain the key points there that you need. So in terms of this, again, a question that you guys could do, and one that we should be looking at. In terms of E, to what extent might the control of CO2 emissions in all industries make it difficult for the British government to achieve its macro objectives? Well, you'd need to know the 4 macro objectives. Why would it make it difficult to achieve the objectives? Well, it's going to raise costs. It's going to push up prices in inflation. That might reduce demand and cause unemployment and lower growth. And also prices may go up, which makes Britain less competitive, and therefore the trade balance will suffer. On the other hand, trying to control emissions can create new jobs. It can be growth. Instead of just talking about growth, it can be sustainable growth. Firms may be able to cut emissions without raising prices. Through innovations and so on, and increase in aggregate supply. I'm not sure why that's saying a leftward shift. That would be a rightward shift, leading to innovations and an outward shift in aggregate supply. So all of these points can be done. Now I hope that goes to show you guys exactly the sort of technique that you should be using. I've only got a number of seconds left, so I'm just going to pass on the one that I want you guys to be doing. So this is your practice go. I want you to use the same technique as I've used. So first of all, you read the questions. Don't worry about question A, you can't do it, I don't think yet. And then once you've done that, use the effective wider reading technique, and then have a go at the questions. You're not, all you need is bullet points. Think about the sort of diagram, think about the technique that you use. Okay, so that's what you're doing for your fifth period work this week. Okay, thanks everyone.